Loud. Tonight, it is our pleasure to welcome to Agile PDX, Jeff Scott, an Agile enthusiast, and Ron Quartel and James Shore, who will be co-presenting. We have Ron primarily presenting. Once he gets a chance to get to his computer and his slides, he'll share some interesting information about FAST Agile and how to deal with scaling and a couple of other challenges that you run into with teams and how he's dealt with them in the past. This month, we want to thank our sponsor, ProFocus, who has provided us the capability to pay for our Zoom license as Agile PDX and is currently hiring. If you haven't checked out their website lately, they have quite a few jobs posted. If you're looking, reach out and work with them. They are happy to help and definitely a pro-Agile employer. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
Well, I'm going to turn it over to James, I think, as far we were talking about earlier, but welcome everyone.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Welcome. We're here today to talk about FAST Agile, which I think is absolutely fascinating. Or maybe I should say fascinating. I don't know, probably not. But unfortunately, we are going to be starting a little bit late, so I'm going to tap dance. And the reason we're starting late is because COVID. Ron was called to get his vaccination like moments before the session was going to start. So if you see somebody in a car sort of off in the corner, that's Ron rushing back home. So we've got about 10 minutes to fill. And I thought we would fill it just by having a quick sort of discussion about anything that you're interested in relating to Agile. Let's just have a roundtable conversation. There's not a lot of people here, so I think we can just do this live. So if you have a topic that really fascinates you about Agile that you think would be worth discussing, or a question that you'd like to ask some of the people here, go ahead and use Zoom to raise your hand. It should be in the reactions on the bottom bar. You should see a raise hand, or if you're on video, just do this and I'll call on you. Stefan, I see a thumbs up. Is that saying that you want to say something?
That's me.
Go for it.
Yeah, I'm having one of these debates with my hierarchy, right? They want to do two things. They want to start calling POs chickens, and I'm arguing, no, we're full members of the Scrum team. But worse, they're trying to insert dev managers into the retros. And I have a real problem with that. I'm trying to explain to them that the power hierarchy makes it very difficult to have an honest conversation with the manager in the room.
Yeah.
And I'm not getting too far. And I'm wondering if anybody else has encountered this. And more importantly, have they encountered a situation where it actually worked to have dev managers in the retro? I've done it, and it doesn't work for me, but it doesn't mean it hasn't worked for somebody else.
I think that's a great question. So yeah, if you have experience with dev managers in the retro, positive or negative, raise your hand, wave at the camera or something like that. Camille.
So I have experience with both. And the only times I've ever seen it work well is when there's absolute trust between the dev team and the management. And you have a very agile team if that's the case. Generally speaking, it doesn't.
Yeah, that would be my.
Yeah, we just came out of storming. We're kind of forming now. We're just coming out of storming now. So I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah. Does anybody have any real world experience where you faced this and were able to push back on it successfully? It's maybe asking a lot. Anybody? Doesn't look like it. Jeff.
A little bit. Yeah, I've definitely had, well, kind of an interesting case because, you know, I think like what was said there is if there's really good trust, it makes, you know, it can work really well. In the case that I'm thinking of, I had a really good development manager who was able to go keep like executives, managers, and other project managers who otherwise would have been there either every day or every week at bay as a result of that. And that really, has worked out well. So there is definitely something to be said for being able to keep that separate. But if this is a manager that is close with the team, helpful, going to be able to assist you with changing goals and manipulating scope, then it's really useful to have them in there, because they can go help make the case and sometimes prevent a whole bunch of work by helping you just change the scope. That's where I've seen the biggest benefit, is that you can get really easy sign off on things that you won't need to do.
Well, we have them in all meetings. I just said no to having him in the retro.
Eric, I see your hand up.
I am working in an environment right now where the people managers are very much involved with the squads, as they're known in this company, and are included in the retrospectives, at least that I'm running or helping with. And I think that what makes it helpful or makes it functional right now is that we're addressing the system as it is, and the system isn't a Scrum team that's independent of management. The reality is that these managers, also called dev leads in this org, are very much part of the system, and we're embracing it, dysfunctions and all, and working together to try and make improvements that include people. And maybe I'm lucky that there aren't terrible dysfunctions and animosity between the managers and the people reporting to them. But just trying to be open about, we're all involved. We all want things to move somewhere. Let's make the progress we can.
Thank you. And it looks like Ron is here. So Ron, are you good to go?
I am.
Okay.
And I caught the question to the previous one, and a lot of these questions are good, because I think they're kind of going to relate to what you hear tonight as well. So Jeff asked me to come and speak based on a session I did previously last year. I'm going to share my screen. Around, and Jeff was very host disabled participant screen sharing. Maybe that was
you have to specifically turn it on, and you might have to stop and restart Zoom to do that.
No, you should be able to go, Ron.
No,
Go
okay.
for it.
Let's try again.
Yep.
Oh, here we go.
There's a button at the bottom, at least on mine.
Yeah.
Yes, the button was there, but it was not working. But now it is. That's okay. So we go here.
Ron, would you like me to introduce you?
Yeah, please. While I set this up, that would be really good.
Okay. So yeah, I ran across FAST Agile several years ago now at Agile Open Northwest, and which is a fantastic local Portland, Seattle conference. If you've never been to it, it uses OpenSpecs technology. Highly recommend that you go. And I was instantly enamored with what Ron was saying, because I've been looking for a solution to scaling Agile for a long time. And there's all sorts of stuff. Of course, we've all heard of SAFe, although I've not heard of people who've used it more than a couple of years before giving up on it. And there's less, and there's dead, and there's all these other things, but none of them struck me as really Agile. Agile ideas tend to look at the problem from a new perspective, whereas everything I was hearing about about scaling Agile was looking at the idea of scaling from pre-Agile perspectives. But Ron was actually looking at it from an entirely new perspective. And ever since he presented on it, I've wanted to know more. So at one point, I buttonholed him after a conference somewhere, and we just sat and we talked about it for a couple of hours. And I really just dug in and got more information. And the more I hear about it, the more I think this is really an innovative approach to scaling Agile. It's really something new that I am just looking forward to trying. Not had a chance to try it out yet. So I was thrilled when Ron asked me to help moderate today's session, and I hope you all enjoy this session because I think this is really something special. And if you have the opportunity to experiment with new ideas in your organization, I really encourage that you do so. And give me and Ron a call because we're both excited about seeing this in new places. And we're willing to sort of set aside what we'd normally want to work somewhere to work in a place that's trying these ideas. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Ron. And what we're going to do is, as Ron is talking, collect your questions into the chat on Zoom. And after Ron's got about a 15-minute presentation, after that presentation is done, I'll be hosting a fireside chat where I'll be bringing up some of my own questions and I'll also be bringing up the questions that you put in the chat. So please do take advantage of the chat, put your questions in, and I'll collect them as the session goes. And with that, turn it over to you, Ron.
Great, thank you, James. You know, James Shore is one of my heroes in the Agile world. I don't know if you know that, James, but so I read James's book, The Art of Agile, many years ago before I'd ever met James, and then I turned up at Agile Open Northwest one day. I'm like, that's James Shore. I was sorry, James, I was a bit of a fanboy, but I was like, oh, he's actually here. So to have James interested in something that I'm a part of, it's like, wow, this is amazing. And to, yeah, I really hope that we get to work together really soon on this, James, because I'm like you, I think it's got a lot of potential, which is why I'm sharing, and why I'm excited that someone, you know, of James's caliber in the Agile community has spotted it. So yeah, the story is dynamic reteaming plays a big part of it, and Jeff was particularly interested in this aspect of Fast Agile. So this is why I'm throwing this up here. This is a book by Heidi Helfen. She lives down in California, and highly recommend the book, and it relates very strongly to Fast Agile. Like everything she says in here is certainly supportive of Fast Agile, which is built on top of this concept of dynamic reteaming. So is the slides changing for you? Yep, great. All right. So Fast Agile FAST is an acronym for Fluid Scaling Technology, and then fluid scaling technology can be used in Agile environments, and it can be used for Agile at scale. So it's Fast Agile is the name of it, and I'm writing a book. I've started a book. It's called Embracing Chaos, and because chaos theory plays into FAST. And it's also a bit of a play on words, because if you remember the original white book, which was kind of my birth into the Agile world, Kent Beck's Extreme Programming Explained, Embrace Change. Oh, there we go. Thank you. James is holding the book up. That book was, I think I call James's book the other white book. Like after this first white book, I think James's next was like, this is my new favorite white book, and I'll still continue to plug it that way. But the subtitle of that was Embracing Change, and I'm taking this further. We're going to embrace chaos, so we're going to talk a little about chaos and chaos theory. In fact, I was thinking of calling this session Dr. Strange Attractor. How I learned to stop command and controlling and love chaos. So I got one laugh. I can see John Reed laughing there. So it does require something, knowing something about chaos theory and having watched the movie Dr. Strangelove. So I don't know how many people would really get that.
How I learned to love the bomb, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So in my case, I learned to love chaos. So that's Strange Attractor and chaos. It's a play on words. So who is this person, Ron Quartel? I'm a software developer at heart. Unfortunately, I don't get to write that much code these days, but I still consider myself a software developer. Right now, my job title is XP coach, or a technical coach, which is more common these days. I am an Agile coach. I've done Agile coaching. I've been a dev manager. I've done a bunch of stuff. My life's purpose is to untether the human spirit in the workplace. And that came about through my work with Fast Agile, and that story may come out. But when I grow up, I want to be Woody Zill. And Woody is going to play into this story as well. I'm sure most of you know Woody Zill. And this is, James has got, I asked James for permission to use this quote, which is part of the deck. So James, your face has been splashed around quite a bit. This is a deck I've used a few times now. So we've got the thumb of approval from James. So Simon Sinek starts with why. So I was trying to think about the why of FAST, and so the why of FAST is it's agile for the age of disruption. So agile is it's old. It's getting on in age now, right? It's a good 20 years old. Scrum is 20 years old, and what the world looked like 20 years ago is very different than what it looked like now. So we weren't in the age, or well, maybe we're in the early part of the age of disruption, but we are now full into the age of disruption. And Agile, Fast Agile was created in and for the age of disruption. And that's I hope that will come clear a little further into the presentation here, what the ramifications are of being in the age of disruption and why that is different. So how does FAST work? It works via self-organization, purely via self-organization. And what is FAST? Well, we combined open space with open allocation to create an agile method. Okay, yeah, blah, blah. We still don't know anything about FAST. So I wanted to touch on this idea of the age of disruption. So the previous age we've come out of is called the age of mass production. And the primary ways of working in that era were around, were complicated ways of working. So this is where Taylor's governance works and was designed for. And this diagram here is from the Conway model, which I don't have I'm hoping most people here are familiar with it. So when I say complex, I mean that top left quadrant, and complicated as the top right quadrant. And we've moved from a complicated world into a complex world. And the nature of complexity is it's nonlinear, it's non-deterministic, and it's non-reductionist. So it's a very different world. You hear we're in the age of VUCA. VUCA standing for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So we're now in a VUCA world where the rate of change is ever increasing. That wasn't true 20 years ago. Back when I started learning XP, for instance, that wasn't true. So I've put Scrum here. This is where Scrum sits, and I've put that there. I didn't put that there. The inventor of this model, the Conway model, Dave Snowden, put Scrum there. Scrum is a borderline between complexity and complicated, whereas FAST is on the borderline between complex and chaotic. And I think that's what makes FAST suitable for the age of disruption, because it sits firmly in this complex space. It's actually in the complex space, but it's on the border. And Dave Snowden says that there's a great video out there about what comes after Agile. And he said, something pretty soon is going to come up as a pure complex system. And I think this is it. I think FAST is it. In fact, that's my next to do, is actually get in touch with Dave Snowden and say, hey, I want you to look at FAST and tell me, is this the complex system that you were talking about? So understanding complicated versus complexity will help. And this is where Dr. Strange Attractor comes in, and chaos theory. So that's the why, but underneath all of that, I think this is the real why, and this might be a bit more compelling and speak more to this audience. So the Agile I fell in love with is the one over there on the left. That's the beetle that's running along nicely. When I left, I worked in that company for 10 years, and that was my introduction to Agile. That was extreme programming. I fell in love with Agile. It was amazing. And then when I left this company, I got out in the big world. I got to see what other companies were doing, And then I started seeing corporate Agile, or you hear dark Agile, flaccid Agile. And you know, some of the questions I heard before this session, I'm like, they're so common, those questions. Why is it that we keep getting Agile so wrong in the same patterns all over the place? And I call that corporate Agile. And I think, well, I hope that you'll see this too. I think FAST fixes corporate Agile. I think FAST takes Agile back to that beetle there. And then scaled Agile, you know, I think that's a really good rendition there of the Beatles. I think that's kind of what we've done with scaled Agile. So the story, actually, I'll come back to the story about safe and scaled Agile when we get to the origin story of FAST. So I'll skip. I'm going to go to apparently when you tell a story, you're supposed to start at the 11th hour and then come back to the first hour. So this is the 11th hour. That's Steve Quo there. I believe he's online. Yeah, there's Steve. Steve was with me here at Primera Health Insurance here in the Pacific Northwest in Seattle. That's Steve with the orange shirt. So I joined a team here of XP developers, and you can see we're set up for pair programming here. And we were a team of XP programmers, and we had a special little bubble of autonomy. So my manager there said, we're going to be able to do things differently. It's going to be like a startup, skunk works, we're off to one side. And that was the only reason I agreed to join a very traditional company whose culture was actually very, I don't want to poo-poo the company, but it was traditionally toxic, right? I don't do well with large companies, so don't take this personally for that company. I call most large companies like that. And I'm like, why would I want to join that company? And Steve and his manager said, no, this is going to be different. We're going to get to do extreme programming. You get to kind of create it how we want. So I'm in. So I joined this team, and we were going to be able to do digital products. So we had a set of products that we were going to create. At this point, we were working on one product, and we were building the team out with the plan to take on more products. So we're hiring, and we're actually cherry picking people from the Seattle area that know extreme programming or that were very compatible, because this was what we were building up. During this period, my manager was looking for a Scrum Master, and I said, hey, can I help with that hiring? Because if we get that wrong, it's not going to go well. And he said, sure, you can help out. So we couldn't find anyone. So I said, look, I'll take that role until we find someone. So I moved from developer to Scrum Master. I don't think I got to even write a line of code yet. It was a very quick transition. I became then the Scrum Master. We're building the team out. We get to the point where we are now probably around 18 people, and we're ready to start our next product. So extreme programming can kind of maintain larger team sizes. So we were still one team at 18 people. We're about to take on the next product, and I'm the Scrum Master. We're about to do 2 products, and we got 18 people. So what do you do? Jeremiah Hawkins, I'm gonna call on you, because I can see recognition in your eye. What would you do, Jeremiah? First, you would unmute your microphone.
If I mute myself.
Yeah.
The typical thing would be to try and split the teams into smaller, probably 3 teams.
Right. So that's the typical Scrum answer, which I knew how to do. I've been an Agile coach. I could do that with my eyes shut almost. But here's the gotcha. These 18 people knew each other. They were kind of bonded together. The one product we've been working on was already kind of leaning towards legacy. The new product was sexy. Who doesn't want to work on a greenfield product? But now the people that had been working on the old product, we needed some of them, if not all of them, to hang around to work on the old product because they knew most about it. Whereas the new people, so, you know, we go, all right, new people, you get to work on new product. Older people get to work on the old product. But then I'm like, is that really fair? Because the older people probably are the ones that most deserve to work on a new product. because they need a break and they can get to, you know, so the most deserving were now tethered to the old product. And I'm like, yeah, what do I do about this? And that's when an idea came back to me. So that was the 11th hour. So now you're hanging, ooh, what happened? I don't know how my storytelling skills are panning out, but there's the 11th hour, leave you on a hanging moment. So now let's go back in time. So there's my challenge. We've got one large team with 2 products, what to do. So here's the idea that I went back to, which goes back to 2014. 2014, I'm in New Orleans at the Scrum Alliance, a large Agile gathering, Agile conference. About 800 people in this conference. The third day of this conference is an open space event. So I'm at this open space event. The theme of this conference was Agile at Scale. And I'm watching Agile at Scale. At this point in my career, I'm an Agile coach. All the coaching I've been doing has been around at the team level. So I'm teaching teams Scrum or extreme programming. And I'm very comfortable with that. And I'm happy doing that because I know this stuff works. So that's my comfort zone. And in that era, like we're watching lots of things come out about Agile at Scale. It was like the holy grail, Agile at Scale. And I'm watching everything and nothing's sitting right with me. But I'm thinking, well, these are smarter people than me. Let's just see what happens. And when the dust settles on things are worked out, then I'll decide if there's something I want to be a part of, and then you know, get more involved that way. So that was my view of Agile at Scale, but something wasn't sitting right and I couldn't put my finger on it. So now I'm at this open space event, day 3, and I've decided I'm just going to be a butterfly because I'm exhausted. I've been presenting the previous day. I'm just going to be a butterfly, if you know the terms from open space. And so I'm sitting watching the event unfold, and we've just populated the marketplace, the agenda wall. And I'm looking, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. In 20 minutes, 800 people have just self-organized a one-day event. In 20 minutes, 800 people have just self-organized. When do you ever see 800 people self-organize anything? And just the sheer beauty of open space struck me. And I'm like, this is Agile at Scale. Self-organization, that word is in the Agile Manifesto, right? This feels Agile. Why aren't we using open space as a way to scale Agile? And that's me jumping out of my chair. Eureka, why aren't we using open space? So I switched from butterfly and I facilitated a session right there. Why aren't we using open space as a way to facilitate Agile? I was so excited. It was the birth of an idea. I couldn't shake that idea. And so I kept building on it. And I created an idea called FAST. And I presented it a year later in Utah at a conference called Agile Roots. And it's called Agile Roots because of Utah. Snowbird was where the Agile Manifesto was born. So they called it Agile Roots because it was very near where the Agile Manifesto was born. So at this conference, I presented, that was the very first kind of birthplace I call of FAST, and I presented at a conference just as a like, hey, here's an idea. Why aren't we using open space? So I hadn't done anything yet. I'm just like, here's an idea. And someone said to me at the end of that, they came up to me as a gentleman, and this was his quote. He said, this is brilliant. I wish I'd known about FAST a year back before my company tried to install SAFe. I wish I'd got this gentleman's name, which I didn't put in here because there's another part where he says, which turned out to be a total nightmare. What you've created here is a complex adaptive system. And I went, I have? These are new words to me. Like, what's a complex adaptive? I didn't really create anything, right? All I put together was a couple things were already there. But then I started studying what complex adaptive systems were, and this is where I started appreciating chaos and complexity. And so all the chaos and complexity that is in here, it's nothing that I did. It's already part of open space. So by 2016, this is now then when I'm at Primera, this is when the idea comes back to me. and says, well, why don't we, instead of splitting the teams, why don't we use this idea of open space? So this idea came back to me, hey, do you want to do this? So I asked the tribe if they wanted to do it, and they said, yeah, sure. So we said, well, let's give it 2 months. If it doesn't work within 2 months or by the end of 2 months, we can go and do the Scrum answer. That's easy. I can blindfold me, tie my hands behind my back, and we can do that. That's easy. I've done that pattern many times. But let's try something different. And I think this is missing actually to what James's point. We're not doing enough experimentation, I think, in Agile. And so we had a chance to experiment. And so what you're going to hear about, so FAST evolved while we're actually doing it, because when you do it, you know, the rubber hits the road and you find out a bit more about it. So you're going to hear today about this experience at Primera. All right, so you still don't really know what FAST is. You've heard open space, you've heard something about scaling. So I've had to work out how to describe FAST in a very concise way. And here's what I've come down to. It's 2 sentences. We're going to combine all the teams into a tribe. We're going to throw the work on the wall and let teams self-organize around that work. Every 2 days, we're going to meet back, share progress, rinse and repeat. There's the 2 sentences. Make sense? Yeah, Ron, that makes loads of sense. We totally get it. Let's break that down. So we're going to combine the teams into a tribe. So if you remember, we said we had 18 people. So this is the tribe as it got larger. At Primera, the largest we got to it was around 50 people in the tribe. We ended up with 2 tribes, but that's another story. But our largest tribe was about 50 people, and this is what it looked like. Then we threw the work on the wall, which we ended up calling this a release map. So the idea was, I was inspired by story mapping. Patton, Jeff Patton? Yeah, the idea of Jeff Patton's story mapping, because yeah, if we can visualize all the work, we'll put it on the wall, and then the idea was, well, people will be able to say, well, let's work on this one next, or let's work on that one next, and we have these stories on the wall. So that doesn't work out at scale, it turns out. So instead of putting all the stories on the wall, we ended up putting just the high-level items on the wall, which is a release map. And then the smaller level items, we did something else with those, which I'll talk about later. But essentially, it's I just want to give you the flavor for now, and we can drill more into the details if it comes up in questions. Okay, so we've combined the teams into a tribe. We've thrown the work on the wall. Now we're going to let teams self-organize around the work, and that's very much based on open space. So I'm going to flick back to this image here. What we're seeing here is that open space event. In FAST, we call this the FAST meeting. So we're essentially all gathered together, and during this meeting, there's something that looks a lot more like open space, where someone says, well, I'm interested in working on this thing here. I'm going to be over in room number 1. Or Steve Quartel will say, I've got a bunch of refactoring I left behind. I'm going to be over in room number 2. Tina will get up and say, I think there's a common object pattern that's coming out. I think there's a component layer that needs to happen. I'm going to be over in room number 3. And then Bob gets up and says, that new feature that was announced by the product director, I'm going to start that over in room number 4. So I've given you 4 examples there, 2 of which came off the wall, but 2 didn't as well. So Steve was going to do refactoring, and Tina was going to create a component layer. And that's totally fine in FAST, right? Because we trust the tribe to do the right thing. So we're using the collective intelligence of the tribe to determine what should happen at the right time, which kind of comes back to open space, right? The right conversations are going to happen at the right time with the right people. So we're kind of using that same lower, complex system for work. I mean, if it can work for open space, let's see if it can work here. So we have this open space event. People have said, I'm going to be in room 1, 2, 3, or 4. I've just used 4 here, for example. Then everyone else in the tribe, they look at those four items and they go, well, I'm most interested in that one. I'm going to go join Steve. Someone else will go, well, I've been working so long on the back end. I want to learn about front end. Well, that work over in room number 3, that's got a lot of front end. I'm going to go over there. So there's different reasons why people will go to a room, and you've got the freedom to decide where you want to go. The reality is most people stick together, and the teams become very semi-sticky. And most people will pick up a feature and run with it all the way through. But you have that autonomy to do whatever you feel is the right thing to do for the product or for the release. So this image here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got 5 teams there sitting at 5 different tables. They've self-organized into teams. We're actually looking at a hackathon. And so FAST is actually really good at facilitating hackathons. And if you think there's a lot in common with hackathons, where we've got a group of people that show up for an event, a weekend event, they don't even know each other. And yet they'll have a stage, people get up and say, well, here's my little project. Someone else says, oh, here's my project. Everyone else in the audience goes, well, I'm mostly interested in that project. They dynamically form a team around that person. They go to work for 2 days and they produce working software in 2 days. So a hackathon is very similar to FAST. FAST is like a continuous hackathon. And you can use FAST to facilitate a hackathon, which is actually what you're looking at here, but it looks the same. I'll also point out here that three of those teams are doing mob programming there. That's what's happening on those large screens. And mob programming and FAST are extremely compatible, which comes out in the story later as well, if questions will come around it. So now teams have self-organized around work. They've gone off to work for 2 days. At the end of 2 days, we come back together, and each team's going to share their progress in what we call show and tell. And show and tell is a synchronization point. Do not think Scrum. Do not think that this is a sign-off. Do not think that we're showing things to a product owner or anything. All we're doing is trying to get, it's closer in feeling to a stand-up than a sprint end of meeting. I'm even forgetting the words. So this is what it looks like. And here we can see someone giving a demo. So the rules with demos are, if you've got something to demo, then please demo it. But if you don't feel the need to demo. So if the work I was working on was changing the format in a log file, I could do a demo. Here's the old format. Now we can see that we've got 6 decimal places in the timing, and we're now using GST format, right? Does that make much of a demo? Or can I just say, yeah, we changed the log format in the files because custom X needed it that way. That's all that the tribe needs to stay in sync. So keep it short. So this meeting, well, actually, I'll get on to the next part. So this is the show and tell, the synchronization point. Now, while we're all gathered, each team has gone around and said, here's what we're doing. We said, hey, while we're all here, let's kick off the next iteration. So there's one meeting in FAST. That's it. It's called the FAST meeting, where we close the last iteration and we open the next iteration. And there's the little thing that happens between those two is when the product director gets up and rallies the troops, rallies the tribe, and says, you people are amazing. I love what you're doing, and here's the vision. Here's why we're doing it. Oh, and by the way, here's the vision, and here's why we're doing it. Did I mention? Here's the vision. Here's why we're doing it. Because if we keep repeating it, people will eventually get it. So every opportunity we say, this is why we're doing it. This is why we're gathered. This is who we are. This is what we're about. So we're really creating cohesion within the tribe. And this is that point of cohesion. So now we've gathered together, we rinse and repeat. This whole meeting takes, it took us about 15 minutes. And that was with 50 people. So how long it would take with 150? I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be more than 30 minutes. And the reason I say 150 is I think that's the theoretical maximum size of a tribe. And that's based on research done into Dunbar's number. If you read the book, The Tipping Point, there's been many independent groups that have independently come to that same number of 150 people. Gore-Tech being one of them as well. The company Gore, W.L. Gore, who create Gore-Tex, they discovered this number as well. So the theoretical maximum size of a tribe is 150 people. And so this is why I call it an agile scaling model, because that tribe could grow to 150 people. So FAST can be used in place of Scrum. It works at the small scale, and it just naturally grows and can scale out, which is very different because Scrum can't do that. Scrum doesn't scale without something else around it, i.e. Scrum at scale, or, Scrum at Scrum, Scrum at scale, less, DAD, safe. These are all things that wrap around, try to scale Scrum. I'm not trying to scale Scrum. I'm doing something that isn't Scrum that has scaling inherently built into it. So it's a very different model. It's kind of revolutionary, and there's very, how to make it work and where it might work is a very interesting conversation, which I'm pretty sure we'll go there. So with that, we all fall down. This is a little comedy slide. So with that, I hope you've got an idea of FAST. So rather than me going further into dumping more information on you, I'm going to let Emergence tell us where the conversation should go, because I'm learning to trust in Emergence, which is part of FAST as well. Let's let Emergence and Complexity direct us. So hopefully you've got some questions and you've fielded them in the chat, and James has got a good flavor of them. So I think we'll, if that's okay, we'll switch over to fireside style chat, and James and I will chat, and let's see where it goes.
Great. Thank you so much, Ron. Every time I hear about FAST, I'm like, I just am reminded how beautifully simple it is, and yet how much complexity it seems like it can support. So I did see some questions in the chat. I did capture them. I have a whole bunch of things that I want to ask about. But I think I'd like to start out, Ron, if you could go back one slide.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to recap this all. And I'm going to tell you what I heard you say. And I want you to tell me if it's right. And then I think I'd like to dig in a little bit more. So I'm also seeing some more questions come in. Thank you. I will be bringing those up as the opportunity arises. So FAST is a loop, Ron. Every 2 days, you have a FAST meeting. Between those 2 days, people are working in self-organized groups in the open space model. And in your FAST meeting, you say you've got a group activity or an icebreaker, which it looks like is optional, announcements, recap the process, and then the demo that you told us about. And then the product directors get up. I assume that's equivalent to the product managers that or product owners that we have in Scrum. Is that right?
There's a lot of parallel.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So they're gonna sort of say, this is where we're going. This is why we're going there. Remind everybody what's up. But they're not talking about specific features that we want to do or things that we need to deliver.
They might. So if there was something really important, then they can say, all right, there's a new feature that's come in. I'm bringing this to your attention because it's a new feature. So this is going up on the wall here. Let me tell you about this new feature. This is really important because if we can, the reason this is here is we've been talking with Microsoft, and they've indicated if we can do this thing, there's a good chance that they might buy our product. So this is why this is here. This is the most important thing that's happening right now. I'm going to put this on the wall. And so that might be how the product director will indicate preferences or importance. And so that's in the meeting. The product director is very much more aligned with product management and leadership. And so yeah, if they feel the need to highlight, hey, this is more important than that, then that's the time to do it. Does
Okay.
that answer your question?
It does, yeah. So what is the product director doing between FAST meetings then?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the product director is more more product manager. So I think product management's really moved on a lot, and I think that's kind of missing in the idea of a product owner. So product management, like when I started with extreme programming back, which is 2002, product management has moved on so much since then. Like lean startup didn't exist. That came about after. So the product manager understands lean startup, understands what customers are, understands how to run experimentation. And I think this is one of the key differentiators of FAST as well, is that the focus is on discovery and delivery and design, versus what I think is the shortfall of extreme programming and Scrum is it's so focused on delivery. We talked about the on-site customer, and we're going to deliver. We deliver. Even the Agile Manifesto talks about we're going to deliver. But what we understand now about products is it's as much about discovery, and so there could be parallel activities happening. So what are our assumptions about the customer? What's this? Well, how do we test those assumptions? Well, what experiments can we come up to test those assumptions? What's this? So what experiments do we have going on? So this is where, and why I didn't use the word product owner, because I want to go more towards product management in its kind of true feel. Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, they will be working on that. They'll be providing continuous feedback. In the Agile Manifesto, it says that business people and developers work together daily. Now, if that's true, why should I get sign off on a story only at the end of a sprint, right? If we're working together daily, so I'm getting towards getting something done, and there is no concept of that in FAST, but let's say there was. We're getting towards done. So, and this is how it used to be with my XP team. Like, we're getting towards done in a story. We'd get the product, the on-site customer, or the SME who wants to know about it. We'll say, hey, come and check this out. I think we're done. Have a look. And we'd say, hey, demo. And we'd call out demo. Everyone in the room would come and check out the demo. And it might be on day 3 of the iteration, day 5, day 7. And that's when we give the demo. And the SME would go, you know what? Now I'm seeing it. Can you make it orange instead of green? I'm like, sure. And then we make it orange. And then we call them back over. Hey, how's it look? Perfect, done. So that's how we got stories done, right? Because if we're working together daily that closely, that's how we get continuous feedback, right? There's no, you can only get sign off on these days and these times. And so I want the product director to be more like that.
Fantastic. Might come back and dig into that a little bit more, but I'm gonna sort of stay at the high level for a moment to get through the whole structure of the FAST meeting, so 15 minutes, that seems really fast. I mean, yeah. I guess that's the point. By the way, I have to say, Ron, I love that you're giving people a choice of being fast or safe. I think it's brilliant that they can either be fast or they can be safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I just love the acronym.
Yeah.
So the POs set the direction, then the stewards step up and pitch. And this is like open space technology. This is the open space marketplace where people say, I'm going to propose a session. Mm-hmm. And in open space, when you are proposing a session, all you're doing is committing to show up. You don't need to be the expert. You don't need to have anything present. You're just holding the space. Mm-hmm. Is that what a steward is doing in FAST?
So we call it like an iteration steward or a story steward. Mm-hmm. So no, you are taking a sense of ownership of what you're doing. So that there is a difference to open space, because you do have to have some understanding. And typically you say, I'd like to work on this, and here's why, and here's what I want to do. So a little brief outline of what you want to do. And this is where natural leadership kind of comes in. if I said that and no one shows up to my session, that's telling me something about my leadership, or maybe it just be that there's different things about happening. But essentially, this is an opportunity for people to take on leadership versus our very traditional companies now. When do you ever get a chance to be a leader in our traditional companies? Like once in a blue moon, oh, the dev manager role comes up and 20 people fight over it. And do you want to be a manager anyway? Maybe you just want to be a leader. And so this is in a self-organizing system, in a chaotic system, natural order will always ensue. And so that open space event is a chaotic event, and natural order comes out of chaos. And this is why I say how I learned to love chaos, because once we open to chaos, whoever the right people are to lead stories will come forward and they will lead them. I might lead 5 iterations in a row and then back off because the thing I was really passionate about is now done. Like that feature is done. It took 5 iterations. Now I've finished. I don't feel the need to be a leader or anything. And I'm just going to go and help out on other stories. So leadership is fluid. And this is why we call it fluid scaling technology, because leadership is fluid and team dynamics are fluid. Does that answer?
Yeah, I think it does. So you have people stand up and say, I'm going to take responsibility for this thing, this story.
Mm-hmm.
Are they expected to then have it done by the end of the 2 days?
I'm going to give an example of what that might look like and why the answer to that is no. So if you remember, I said the product director said, hey, we've got Microsoft coming in. Here's a new feature. I'm going to put it over on the wall. So Steve Quo says, I'm going to work on that feature. So Steve Quo gets up at the meeting, says, I'm really excited about that feature because this is right up my alley. I've been waiting for it. I'm gonna visit. He's showing us. I'm gonna work on this. I'm gonna be over in room number 1. So let's say in theory, there is about 60 people days worth of work on that. Just in theory, like it's of that nature. So Steve says that 3 people show up to room number 1 to work with Steve. So now we've got 3 people in a 2-day iteration, and I'm hoping 2 days comes up as well because that's optional. So we've got 3 people in 2-day iteration on a feature that all we know is like a few lines about. Are you going to get that feature done in 2 days? No. But what can you do in 2 days? Well, I'm sure there's something we can do. And so that's the goal, is to continually add value. And that's why I say that the meeting is more of a stand-up than a Scrum kind of boundary. Because come in the stand-up, what Steve will likely say is, well, we had the product director come in and tell us about the feature. With that information, we were able to break it down. Actually, this is probably a good point to show you another slide here on how we broke work down and when and why we break it down. It looks something like, maybe this is a good slide. It looks something like this, which is what we end up calling a feature tree. So we got the feature and we said, all right, well, what are we going to do with the 60-day feature? There's 3 of us. Product director starts telling us about it. We go, oh, okay, that's interesting. And we're taking notes. We might be storing it in the wiki, but we're taking notes. And we said, all right, what we heard was this feature is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 7 things on that top level in this example. We heard these 7 things. Does that sound right? Product director goes, yeah, that's correct. So we put those 7 things there. So now we've broken one thing down into 7 things. Every good Agilist knows how to break things down. And that's what we did. And we look at those 7 things and we go, okay, of those 7 things, we'll probably start on, in this case, it's probably that blue one there. It says map. We'll probably start on map. Tell us about map. The product director will start telling us about map. We take notes on that, might go in the wiki. We break map down. And so this is a recursive process. So we're breaking it down just enough, just in time, until we get to the point where we go, right, now we've got something we can actually do this iteration. That piece of work has context, which is that entire map. That work has context. and we say, well, now we've got something to do, and let's, you know, this is small enough and makes sense for us to work on. Let's go. So Steve and his team will work, and we get back to that meeting. We'll go, yeah, in the last iteration, we started on that feature. We broke it down. It looks like this. And we actually got 2 of those 3 things done, which is blah, blah.
Steve wants to say something.
Yeah.
Ron, actually, I just had an epiphany while you were explaining that. So when we mob program, we have short iterations. We've got sometimes 2-minute iterations, sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes 7-minute, you know, but short iterations when you're mobbing. However, when you start mobbing, the person at the keyboard is responding to the person that's talking, the navigator, and the navigator speaks and says where you're going. Then you rotate, and the next person that navigates in may have a completely different plan as to what they're going to do, but they have to accomplish that work and get it complete in the time allotted. Very similar to 2-day iterations, but it's just scaled up to work-sized chunks.
That's a good analogy, yeah.
Right? So when you first start mobbing, if you say, we're going to mob and we're going to do 2-minute iterations, the first couple times, there isn't a lot that gets done in those first 2-minute iterations. There's a lot of planning that happens, but very quickly, the mob self-organizes and figures out how to work through it and work with 2-minute iterations.
Yeah, that's very good. Micro, macro.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very similar. So we get to the end of 2 days, and it doesn't have to be 2 days. In fact, we started with 2 days, and everyone's like, this feels too short, because everyone's used to Scrum, right? Can we go to a week? And I said, we can do whatever we want, but if we do it as an experiment. And we say, well, if we switch it, we'll do it for 2 months, and then we evaluate it and decide if we want to keep that or change it. So we went from 2 days to a week, and then everyone's went, it felt like we were making more progress at 2 days. Can we go back to 2 days? We're like, yeah, let's go back to 2 days. So I'm glad we did it, because we actually appreciated 2 days more at the end. But yeah, the goal isn't to get things done. We didn't have a definition of done. There's no acceptance criteria or anything. We just continually added value. And at the meeting would say, this is the value we did. We actually got these 3 things done, and we're partway through this, and this is where we're going.
Great. I have a couple of questions for you about this, but first I want to remind everybody to double check their settings and put yourself on mute if you're not. We are getting a little bit of interference from other folks. So 2 questions for you about this picture, Ron. And actually, whoever's hosting this meeting, you might be able to forcibly mute folks who should be muted. Couple of questions for you about this picture. First off, is this person have this expression on their face because they're working with Steve?
Probably.
and second, more seriously, what's written on these cards? Is this verbs saying what we're going to do? Is it outcomes? What are actually on these cards that are on the wall here?
So yeah, my background is extreme programming. I'll mention that again. And I'm used to stories that look like this, where it used to be a card which had a few words on it, and the point of the card was to have a conversation. And so that is exactly what's happening here, is to say, what is this thing? And you go and ask the story steward or the feature steward. That's another role that we can talk about if we need to go there. But you say, what is this? And well, often by reading the whole context of the tree, you can kind of work out from the few words that are on it what it is. But it's just enough. Everything is just enough, just in time. So it's just enough words for you to have the conversation. What is this? What are we doing? I'm guessing it's this. This is where over here. I'm like, yep, that's exactly where we are.
So I want to go back to, let's go back to the overview, if you don't mind. So we've got a bunch of people who've said, I want to be a story steward. And the question I have is that limited? Like, is there a certain number of story stewards that you can have as an outcome of the FAST meeting? And yes. if it's not, how do you prevent everybody from being a story steward? And if it is limited, what if you have more people wanting to be a story steward than you have spots available?
Right. That's a really good good observation. And oddly enough, we did hit that. So we had a rule that all production code had to be pair programmed. So had to have more than one pair of eyes on it. There we go. So it could be pair programmed. And when we learned about mob programming, most of the teams ended up doing mob programming. But in the early days, like we said pair programming, and we didn't have a limit. And we found very quickly it went wide because a lot of people are like, oh, I want to do this. Someone's like, I want to do that. I want to do that. So well, it went wide, and I'm like, what's missing here? Because we're not really getting teamwork. We're getting pairing, which is okay. And this is my aha that small scale FAST can be used in place of Scrum because because it facilitates pairs. So yes, we hit that very problem, and so the way to do that is to limit WIP. And we had a discussion as a tribe, and like, well, what makes more sense? How do we get more collaboration? And in particular, there was people wanted to stay within their comfort zone. So as a software developer, I wanted to write code. But what if the most sensible thing, whereas in mob programming, if you hear Woody Zool talk about mob programming, the mob isn't all homogeneous programmers. It's in fact more of, you have to use some Scrum analogy, you have the product director sitting, or the product owner sitting in with the team, so that the second you need to ask the product owner a question, they're right there. And you say, product owner, how does this work? Product owner will tell you, and then we can continue on. The second I needed a designer, the designer is there. So that's what mob programming is supposed to be like. And so we were trying to get more, how do we get more of that kind of cohesion within the stories? How do we get more focus and i.e. limit WIP? So we said, all right, let's say if we've got 50 people in tribe, if we wanted to average X amount of people per team, let's limit the WIP down to 8. So we had a board, which we call the iteration board, and we'd have actual slots on there. So we limited WIP to 8.
So so you did limit it, sort of like an open space marketplace typically has a certain number of spots.
Yeah.
But did you ever encounter the situation where you had 9 people who really wanted to be a story steward? And if you did, how did you handle that?
Yeah, so the rule, the values, one of the values of FAST is to do the right thing. So if someone says, hey, I'm going to create a 9th one, we'll say, well, what is your 9th one? And they say, it's this. Well, go for it. Right? We're using the collective intelligence of the tribe, and if someone says we need a 9th one, then we need a 9th one. And maybe we arbitrarily picked 8, but maybe 9 turns out to be the right number, and we do 9 4 weeks in a row, and we go, hey, let's just have 9 slots on the wall. Okay. So it's how do we use the collective intelligence and the rule of doing the right thing to find out what is the right thing for this tribe.
This sounds like a group of people who worked very well together, which makes me wonder. And I think I want to come back to this, but I just want to put this out there to come back to later. What if you have a situation where people don't all work together?
Thank you for asking that, because the Primera experiment died after 2 years, and that was part of it. So maybe later on we can circle back to that. But to make FAST work, there is certain requirements on the people and type of people that are in the experiment.
Yeah, let's come back to that, because I want to continue going through just sort of the overall view. But related to this question of, people choose to be stewards and then go out and pair or mob, there's a question on the board. What's the smallest team size that FAST could work with? You've talked a few times about small FAST or something like that. I know you've done it with 35 to 50 people, I think you told me at one point. What was the smallest size you had using FAST, and how small do you think it could go? Could it be used for a sort of typical Scrum size team of five people?
Yeah, the 5 plus or minus 2, I think, is the Scrum number. Yes. So anyway, you can use Scrum. You can replace it with FAST. I'd say how small? I don't know, 5 people.
So in that environment, would you have just one story steward each time?
Oh yes. So that is in fact different. So there it would be a lot similar to what we used to do in extreme programming, where a story is the stories are smaller, and I'd say you're either a pair or a mob. Maybe a mob of 3 or a mob of 4. So let's say we had 6 people. So in any given iteration, we got 6 people. We say, hey, what's the most sensible thing for us 6 people to do this next iteration? We understand limiting WIP makes sense. Is it this one thing? Well, you know what? We could do this, and maybe do that other thing there. Let's do 2 things. Okay, there's 6 of us. We could do 3 and 3. We could do 4 and 2. We could do 5 and 1. Like if one of them is research, hey, let me run ahead and do that research. But we're going to decide as our 6 people what the right thing is.
That sounds a lot like what I see on high functioning XP teams. They gather around it is what you say. It's a stand-up meeting. They have a stand-up meeting every day. They say, let's look at the board. What do we need to get done? How are we going to do the work? It's a little more fluid, I think, in a high functioning XP team, because I actually see the teams repair. I worked with one team recently in pandemic years, so that's like 2019 now, that actually a couple times a day would just get up, stand around the board, say, let's figure out what we're going to work on. But I've actually described FAST to people as, what if you took XP and instead of pairing, you did mobbing, and you did 2-day iterations instead of 7-day iterations. Now I'm realizing that maybe it's the stand-up is every 2 days, and we've just got a bit more structure now to make it all work with more people.
You've just described it.
All
and
right.
and so my background is extreme programming, and I'm essentially trying to recreate my first extreme programming experience, which I fell in love with, and I've yet to see it kind of happen again, where I would show up to work in the morning, not knowing what I was going to work on that day. There might be something I was really hoping to work on that day. And we'd get together at 9:30 a.m., we'd stand in a semicircle around the board, and we'd say, go. Now, if I was super passionate, I would jump in first, and I'd say, I really want to work on this. Who can pair with me? So I'm taking natural leadership. Or if I wasn't that passionate, I'd just wait until like the turn came around to me, and I'd go, or someone would say, I need someone to pair with. I'm like, yeah, that sounds interesting. I'll pair with you. Or it'd come around to me, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll work on this one.
Yeah.
And that's what we did every day. So every day I didn't know what I'd be working on. I didn't know necessarily who I'd be pairing with, but I would just kind of use my intuition and what I wanted to do. And I'm kind of trying to recreate that in FAST.
I think a lot of us XPers have had that experience of, that was that great team, and I wish I could reproduce it. Then we go off and do things like create new methods or write books, or just shout at people until we're blue in the face and they're tired of hearing from us. So next on your list is the marketplace. So the stewards have volunteered. They say, I'm going to be in room 1 or room 3 or whatever. And now people go out and say, well, I'm going to go to room 1. And do they announce this, or do they just go do it like they do in open space?
We at Primera, we had an iteration board, and so you would actually go put your name into a slot. So remember I said we limited WIP. We actually had columns on the board which represented areas, and so we had little magnets with our name on it, and you'd put your name in it. So I've written what's called the FAST guide now, and in the FAST guide I said the iteration board is optional. So to your point, James, when we did it, we did put our names up there, but I can also see where people just naturally go over, kind of more like an open space event.
Right.
And you just show up and say, I wonder who's going to show up.
So in open space, we have the idea of a butterfly. If in the law of 2 feet, if you're not learning or contributing, then you move to a place where you can learn or contribute. But it sounds like in FAST, once you choose a group, you stick with that group. Is that true, or do you have butterflies in FAST?
So we have the law of mobility. They've changed the name now from law of 2 feet. So yeah, the law of mobility is one of the laws within FAST as well. And in the FAST guide, it says if you've joined a team that you feel you're not able to contribute, or it's not what you expected, feel free to go and join another team. So let's say Steve, we use Steve before. Steve says, "Hey, I'm going to be over in room 1," and 20 people show up, and Steve's like, there's not that much work to do here. Does anyone want to, And so 6 people go, well, okay, well, I'm going to go do something else. Well, so you've always got that freedom to move. It didn't happen that much. Steve's got a story.
Well, I don't have a story with it, but there were times when I guess it was sort of understanding that you would try and stick with the team for 2 days anyway. You were encouraged to, because a lot like the law of mobility or the rule of mobility is, you may not feel you have anything to give, but your presence there and your knowledge may. And we didn't say you couldn't, though.
Right.
You were just encouraged to stay there, even though it's only 2 days. Just try it.
Thank you. Ron, you've mentioned, you've talked about XP a couple of times. How, and at Primera you were using XP. Would it be possible to use FAST without XP? And what do you think would happen if you did?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because now when I created the FAST guide, what made Scrum, I think part of what made Scrum so successful is that it dropped. It's kind of like XP Lite, right? You have a lot of XP in there, but they took out all of the disciplines. And so that kind of made Scrum lightweight, and maybe that's why it was so successful. So when I put FAST together, I really wanted to put all of XP in there because I know the value of it. But then I also thought, if I do that, what are the chances of people picking it up? So I again left it out, but I do mention in the FAST guide pair programming and mob programming. And I also do mention in the guide the concept of mastery. So we talk about autonomy, mastery, and purpose from Daniel Pink, and FAST provides purpose. So if you remember, the product director goes, this is why we're here. This is why we're here. This is who we are. So that FAST gives us purpose. FAST gives us autonomy, right? I get to choose who I work with and what I work on. So I've got autonomy, I've got purpose. The one part that's missing there is mastery. I know from my career, extreme programming gave me mastery. It taught me to be a disciplined developer and so forth. So I specified very clearly, you need to do something about mastery and find ways to support mastery. So at Primera, Steve was actually he was kind of our technical coach there at Primera, and we did several things for mastery. One of them was Carter time, and we did Carter time and we did research time, where we said, hey, during research time, do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. But we had it was kind of like an open space event, and would show up and would say, well, I'm really interested in this. And if someone else was interested in that, then they'd come along and do that with me. Well, maybe they don't. I go off and do it on my own. But a lot of, but it's to say, follow what you want to learn. And if there's part of the code you want to play with, go play with it. Or if there's a feature that you think should be in there, go do some spiking and then come back and go, hey, look, this is totally going to work. So we did a lot of that, and Steve introduced Carter time as well, where we did very focused learning as well. So it's not in there, but it's hinting very strongly that unless you're doing that, then you're not really feeding your people. And if you want your people to come to be inspired to work at where your company, you need autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So what are you going to do about mastery?
Yeah. I love that. I think mastery is really important. you know, Brian Merrick had his missing I called it Merrick's missing manifesto. He had his 4 missing values from the Agile Manifesto. Let's see if I can remember them. They were discipline, which he meant self-discipline, joy. What were the other ones? And one of them was mastery, I believe. Or no, it was skill, discipline, joy, and something else that is escaping me at the moment.
Yeah.
And that idea of skill, I think, is one of the things that's really important to success with Agile.
Yes.
That Scrum doesn't really talk about, and XP spent a lot of time talking about, of course.
Yeah.
So let me dig into a deeper question. So you're saying, well, we don't have to do XP, but we need to do mastery, and XP is, you know, the Agile method that says the most about that. Let's talk about a specific practice. Like, how much are you depending on this? What if you have a group of people who are using feature branches rather than trunk-based development and continuous integration? Real continuous integration, not the kind where you run a tool on a server somewhere. Could this work without using trunk-based development?
I think it could. And I'm going to use an example of Valve software here. So Valve do open allocation, which has a lot in common with FAST. And there's parts of Valve that are probably doing feature branching, and then there's parts that aren't as well. I don't know that for certain. But this is where Kaizen or continuous improvement comes in, and I had to think about how does continuous improvement fit in with FAST? Because in Scrum you have a meeting that has a have a time that has a retrospective. In FAST there's no static teams. So what does a retrospective look like for FAST tribe? So in the Agile Manifesto it talks about, you know, reflect and adjust, or reflect and improve and adjust. And so I spell out, like, well, I'm not telling you in FAST how to reflect and improve, but I'm telling you, you have to reflect and improve, because that is part of being Agile. And here's some ideas of how to do that. So, you know, once you join mastery with reflect and improve, then, you know, Matt Plavkan, I hope I pronounced that correctly, will say, hey, we're using this branching method, but I think we're using it wrong. I think there's a way better method that we can be using. And in a self-organizing tribe, I would hope that Matt would be listened to. And in fact, Matt could stand up and say, you know, I feel so strong about this. I'm going to facilitate I'm going to take one slot from the board to do some spiking into this style of branching and report back. And people go, yeah, I'll come along with it, do that to you. So that could be how that happens, or it could happen in. I think my best suggestion for reflect and improve in FAST was to actually have an open space event. Let's say it's once a month. Maybe it's once every 2 weeks, where we actually take 2 days out. We say, hey, this is a 2-day event where we're just focusing on reflect and improve. And during that 2-day, it's an open space event. And during that, Matt will say, let's look at the way we're doing features. And Steve will say, let's look at using F#, because I think that can help us. So at this open space event on reflect and improve, you can bring up things like that. And maybe, you know, so you go off and do a little session. You go, yeah, I think that's probably worth doing. And so we're coming up with, hey, what are the experiments we're gonna do in over this next two month period, or within our reflect and improve cadence.
So that reminds me, I remember when you first told me about this, that you said 2-day iterations, and my natural reaction was, well, there's 5 days in a week.
Yeah.
What do you do with the 5th day?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
what do you do with the 5th day?
What would you do?
Well, I don't know.
So that's my answer, because we're in a self-organizing system, right? and that was my question to the tribe as well. So I can tell you my preference, which is what I wanted to do, but it's not all about me, right? Just because I invented this system, it very much needs to be owned by the tribe. So when the tribe says, hey, what should we do? I was like, well, what do you want to do? Because this is your system. I want you to own it. What do you think we should do? And they said, well, so what I wanted to do was just to do it continuous 2 days. So let's start, we say Monday, we do Monday, Tuesday, and then we have a meeting on Wednesday. Now we have a meeting on Friday. But so then the next meeting would be on Tuesday, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The fact that you had to stop and think about that, though, that's
right.
the problem, right?
Yeah, well, when you're in it, it's not so much because you kind of know where you're at. But yeah, to your point, if it is a problem, then what we ended up actually doing at Primera, which I didn't like, but everyone else liked, so it's like, oh, well, that's what we're going to do, was we did Monday and Tuesday, and then Thursday and Friday. So Wednesday was this middle day, and the idea was, well, let's use that middle day for all the meetings. We'll try and put meetings in there, but we'll also use that for our improvement time. So remember I mentioned research time. So Wednesday mornings actually started off as research. Like we started at 9 o'clock was no open space event where we did research, and we did Carter time. We moved to Monday, didn't we, Steve? Yeah. So Carter time we moved to Monday because we said, hey, learning is the most important thing we do here. So let's not make that on Friday. We're going to make learning on Mondays. But yeah, Wednesdays was kind of like this feeling day where we try to encourage, hey, if you're going to pull me into a meeting, let's schedule that for Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, what we found was, if I'm remembering it right, is when we had it on Wednesday, people ended up loading a whole bunch of meetings in it, and it just became a meeting day. We played with it. We thought about Friday and we said, no, we want Fridays off. People take Fridays off. Let's not do Friday. And then we said, how about Mondays? Then we discovered Mondays was actually a really good day for it, because what we found is that day we sort of filled up. We did kata then, we did some learning, we did some refactoring work and some overall help within the system, as well as some planning and organization. And what we found after we retrospected and thought about it some was it started our week off right. It started our week off with learning. It started our week off with researching what we were going to do for the week and planning, not major planning, but getting a good taste of what we were going to do. It's sort of a amuse-bouche for the week. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we would hit it in stride, and yeah.
But we experimented. That was a cool thing. Like, hey, what should we? Let's try and move there. You know, let's try Tuesday and Thursday as the start day. Did we lose James? No, there he is. Is that what you would do, James? My
internet was. You know, I would use the extra day for research and retrospective, I think, for improvement.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I
mean, you could
my internet seems to be having some issues.
You could do 2.5 day iterations, right? So that's why I say, like, start with 2 day as an experiment, but go work out what works for you. Maybe you do a 3 day and a 2 day. Like we're not time boxing. So this is where you got to stop thinking Scrum. Where everyone's like, well, how can you have a 3 day and a 2 day? I'm like, why not? Because all we're doing is adding value and having a check-in point. So I could see a 3 day and a 2 day working, or a 4 day and then a 1 day off, like whatever. Go experiment, find out what works.
Absolutely. I'm going to change the subject now. Let's get into some of the hard stuff. Now it's time. I warned you I might ask some hard questions, so now it's time for the hard questions. Have you ever read the essay, The Tyranny of Structurelessness?
I just noticed we're at time, James. Oh my goodness. So yeah, let's start answer that one, and then I think we should give people the option to drop, because I think 7 was the end time. Is that right, Neil? Yeah.
I
So have I
got
read the
7:30 on
tyranny?
mine.
Yeah,
It is 7.
Neil, which
I believe it was 7, but
Do
I'll
we-
check.
Do we have
I'm-
the option of extending?
I can extend, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy
Yeah,
to
my
stay
invite says
around as long
7:30.
as.
5:30
Okay.
or 7:30.
Yeah, I can stay around as long as people want. So is that all right, Neil, to keep going?
Yes.
Okay. So the tyranny of structure, the tyranny of structureless of structure.
Tyranny of structurelessness.
Structurelessness. So
yeah,
the fact that I don't know the name, no, I haven't read this book.
It was an essay. It's an essay by a feminist in the 1960s
Okay.
who was part of a women's liberation movement,
Yeah.
which was very explicitly self-organizing. But what she found, and I am repeating from memory, it's been a while since I read the essay, but it's well worth reading.
Mm-hmm.
What she found was that the groups would be dominated by people who, if I could say this correctly, were more motivated by controlling the direction of the group than than reaching the aims of the movement. So how does, as a entirely self-organized system where people can work on whatever they want, you said earlier that the story steward doesn't have to do what the product director says is important. So you're really relying on people's goodwill. How do you prevent the group eventually being overwhelmed by people who are more interested in having structural power and pursuing their own agenda than actually pursuing the agenda of the organization?
Yeah, that's a great question, James. Thanks for bringing that one. There's 2 parts to that one. So the first part of people working on things that are the wrong things. So in the FAST guide, there is a part of the meeting which doesn't show it on here because it's optional and we never needed it, which is the product director does have veto. And I've put it in there because of that question, and I'm hoping that would never happen. But product director said, this feature is the most important thing. And we go, and no one picks up that feature. So the product director can go, hey, before we go into picking your teams, no one's picked up this feature. I need this feature done. Who's going to pick up this feature? Bueller. Oh, good. Bueller's going to pick it up. All right, we've got limited WIP. This is my lowest priority run. Are you okay if I take this one off? Yeah. All right, I'm going to switch these 2 here. Great, that's switched. So the product director does have some veto ability. And it would probably look more like, hey, we've just picked, the feature steward, the story stewards have just stood up. Product director can go, hey, can I ask a question here? I think we're probably working on the wrong stuff. Why have we got these things here? And then the story stewards will go, well, because of blah, blah, blah. And the feature steward will go, I didn't think of that. Okay, good. Let's go for it. And so there'll be a little, short dialogue, or they can go, oh yeah, no, you're right. Let's change that. So the feature steward, the product director is just as much part of the tribe as the team. But they do have some leadership, and they should use that leadership. And leadership is, you can lead by inspiration or authority. So the product director does have authority, but use it sparingly and wisely and with limits. So rather than traditional organizations which lean heavily on authority and command and control, how can we use that and as little as possible is really the question. So that's the answer towards the wrong work happening. And then, but the real pain or the real issue behind that is what I call, there's a book I read in high school called Lord of the Flies. And I don't know if you're familiar with that. There's a movie about it. But
it's a pretty common high school assignment for.
Right, it's kind of a classic. So it's a good one to mention because self-organization always works. But does it always work in the way you want it to work? And Lord of the Flies is a great example of self-organization that can go, you know, bullies in a self-organizing system, bullies have got a playground, right? So this idea of like wolves and sheep is another one I've heard. So how do we protect from bullies and excessive command and control? So one is the tribe needs to very much be a tribe of peers. I think there's a great talk by start with Y, what's his name? Simon Sinek. Great talk by Simon Sinek on who's the arsehole in the team. And everyone can point to the arsehole. So that arsehole is going to create problems. So what do you do with the arsehole and the arseholes? Because command and controllers in a tribe are arseholes, and they're going to create problems. So in FAST, we've got this concept of the tribe agreements, which comes from team agreements. But the first three parts of a tribe agreement are: how do we resolve conflict, and how do we make decisions, and how do we change the rules? But that's there to create a sense of to protect our autonomy and to create emotional safety, right? Because without that, a self-organizing system is going to fall down pretty quickly. Well, it's going to self-organize in the wrong direction. Now, I mentioned Valve before, and I think that is actually what's happened at Valve, that there is a little bit of Lord of the Flies going on there. And so I'm always a little bit hesitant to mention Valve when I compare FAST, because everyone goes, oh, Valve, yeah, we've heard about them. There's a toxic environment. And there is, speaking to some people I know have worked there, and that's exactly what's happened. In a self-organizing system, hierarchy will form, but this is natural hierarchy. And this is why I'm not against hierarchy. I'm okay with natural hierarchy, but I'm against authority and command and control. So natural hierarchy without authority and command and control is good, but how do we protect from harm? And this is where it requires, one, to hire the right people, two, to offboard the wrong, and which is I've included in the FAST guide. When you create the tribe, these are the things you have to think about. Because, and to the point of a team versus a group, right? What makes a team? You throw a bunch of people together and call them a team, they're not, they're a group. And this is where Tuckman's group dynamics model comes in. But I think you can bypass Tuckman's model by letting people self-select into teams. And in that vein, this tribe needs to be cohesive and complete. It needs diversity, but we don't need arseholes. And so how do we protect ourselves from that? Is a really good question, because if you don't, it will happen.
Let me pause for a second. Neil, was I right or wrong about us having until 7:30?
It was advertised till 7, but I'm happy to stay till 7:30.
Okay, well, if it was advertised till 7, I think actually this is a really good spot to stop. I know that there are many more questions that I could ask. There are many more questions that came up in the chat. But I guess a good magician always leaves people wanting more. So Ron, thank you so much. This is something I would love to try. If you were left wanting more, go ahead and buttonhole Ron, or he and I are both available to work for much less than our normal rates for companies that are interested in trying this. So if you're in a company that might be interested in trying something innovative, let one of us know. All right. Any final words, Ron?
No, I think that was a great summary. Thank you, James.
All right. Well, thanks very much to Agile PDX for having us. Neil, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much, James and Ron, for coming out on the invitation of Jeff. Jeff, thanks for instigating and getting us such a great overview of the FAST system.
Work with the Navy.
Sorry, was somebody saying something?
I don't know.
Sorry, that was a mistake.
Okay.
Clicked the wrong thing.
All right. I really have a much better understanding of what FAST is now and how it could be applied. And I thank you for sharing that. And I'm looking forward to going back and looking through the video and reminding myself of the lessons that were shared. So,
Where can we find the video?
the video will be posted on the Agile PDX YouTube channel. And Ron and James, I don't know if you have a place that you guys want to post it as well, but we're happy to share the file and make sure it gets posted multiple places.
Yeah, please do. I would like to share it on my website.
Okay.
Thank you all.
All right.
I appreciate this. I'm really excited to explore this work in a world where everybody is remote, and we have a situation where we can experiment with this work not co-located, which was one of the challenges we had in the past, in finding how to make it apply.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. And I think that's it.
And I went in like with very low expectations, and my expectations were surpassed. So they weren't as good as in person, but they were still better than I thought, and they still worked. And I looked at the technology and what we did. I'm like, that would totally work for FAST. So the answer is, if you've been to a online open space event, the exact same technologies they use there, you could use to facilitate FAST.
Yeah. You know, I've been teaching courses that are as interactive as I do in person using a tool, using Miro. I think you could use Mural as well.
Yeah.
And in actually some ways better than what I can do in person. It's a matter of understanding the technology and working with it. For example, I don't try to do a 2-day course remotely. I'll do a half day. I'll do 4 half-day sessions over the course of 2 months.
Right.
Then let people practice the material in between each session. You know.
Yeah. So it has benefits, right?
Yeah. So I'm certain that there are ways to make FAST work as well, remote, or perhaps even better, which is not something I would have said a year ago.
Yeah, me too.
So, you know, yay pandemic, I guess.
I love the fact that you're suggesting a 2-month iteration between sessions, because then you get the experimentation and the follow through of what did we learn and how can we apply what we learned to the next iteration.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing that right now actually for a client. We're have what would normally be maybe a week-long or 3-day course, and it's going to happen over the course of several months, and it's working really well.
Oh, neat.
So it looks like Neil recorded the answer to the question of how do we do fast remote. So thank you.
You did.
For grabbing that,
great.
Neil.
Great.
I did.
We'll just paste that onto the end.
Yeah.
I'll try and flip it together.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that really is it this time. Thanks again,
Yeah.
Neil, and see you all some other time.